This was the Grumman OBE-1 Mohawk, the aircraft that made the only air-to-air kill by the United States Army since World War II. And in fact, this was the only kill they've made so far. And I know it sounds unbelievable, but yes. A propeller-driven observation plane shot down a powerful MiG-17 fighter in a dogfight worthy of appearing in Top Gun. The MiG-17, one of aviation history's most successful fighters, was impressively shot down. But how did a reconnaissance plane, which could barely reach 500 kilometers per hour, manage to shoot down such a capable fighter as a MiG-17? What secrets did this aircraft conceal, and why, despite its remarkable history, is it nearly forgotten? This video covers the history of an observation aircraft that turned the tables on its hunters. So make yourself comfortable and welcome to Guns Club to talk about this fantastic aircraft. We have to travel to 1954. In those years of the Cold War, both world superpowers wanted to be at the absolute forefront in every military field. In that year, the Army would issue a request for a new observation aircraft, an aircraft that could spot targets on the battlefield, like enemy artillery or troops, in order to alert the troops and bombers to attack them. The Navy had also previously submitted a request for a multi-purpose aircraft to replace its old multi-purpose planes. They weren't bad, but they had been in service for a long time and didn't seem suitable for modern warfare. The Department of Defense thought it could kill two birds with one stone, so it decided to unify the two requests and present a single aircraft for both branches. Even before a prototype was developed, the launch of the project was complete chaos. The Air Force fought to have these new planes under its jurisdiction and not the Army's, and the Navy had a design in mind that was very different from what the Army wanted. In the end, it was decided to make the plane for the Marine Corps, leaving the Air Force out of the equation. The Air Force had a limit of just over 2 tons. It can fly under the Army's jurisdiction, but exceptions had always been made for observation planes. All these issues lasted almost 3 years, but in 1957, Grumman got the contract and started the project. The Navy and Army caused additional problems during development. The Navy pressured Grumman to make the plane very simple and cheap, so it would be a great multi-role aircraft, while the Army had other plans. They wanted to include complex and expensive radar and infrared equipment for long-distance detection, also weapons suitable for a fighter bomber, and since it was trendy then, possibly capable of carrying nuclear warheads. So Grumman had to satisfy the requirements of both branches of the armed forces, which were clearly opposed. However, between 1957 and 1959, Grumman continued with the development of the aircraft, trying to meet both demands. In '58, the Navy would withdraw from the project, since they wanted to focus the budget on tanker aircraft, so the entire project was left in the hands of the Army. That fueled the complaints of the Air Force with the Department of Defense. The Air Force said that the Army didn't want an observation aircraft, but rather a ground attack aircraft, and that something like that should fall under the jurisdiction of the Air Force. The complaints were so great that the Department of Defense decided to suggest to Grumman that they stop presenting information about the project publicly, and that they should only present it to the Army and the Department of Defense. This way, the Air Force would have nothing to complain about. The first prototype was a monoplane with 2 turboprop engines of 960 horsepower and 3-bladed propellers each. The plane's most distinctive feature was likely its bulb-shaped cockpit, providing a full view of its surroundings. This gave it a curious insect-like look. They had ejection seats and a triple tail, which was also one of its most memorable features. In April of '59, the first flight tests were completely satisfactory, with exceptional maneuverability, making extremely tight turns. As if it were a helicopter, it could land on extremely short runways, and in addition, its fuel efficiency was very good. It could fly for 2.5 hours, and with external tanks, this time extended to 4 hours. Flying it was also quite economical, $200 per hour. This was everything the Army needed to fit everything they wanted inside. It had to be increased. The size of the final aircraft turned out to be bigger than an F-4 Phantom, measuring 12 meters long and 14 meters wide. It could barely fly at 470 kilometers per hour because of the weight, but it could reach 720 kilometers with the risk of damaging the fuselage and the engines. Similarly, mass production started in 1960 and it was designated as OB-1 Mohawk. The final production cost was $450,000. Not bad for an aircraft with its characteristics. It was a multi-role aircraft, so they could equip it with all the standard Army arsenal. Rocket pods, bombs, and of course, 50 caliber machine guns. Production was going full steam ahead, just in time for 1965 and the United States' entry into Vietnam. "53 Mohawks were sent to Vietnam, being used for multiple roles in the Army. Interestingly, they proved much more useful for ground attack than observation. For their observation missions, they carried 2.50 caliber machine guns, 2 7-centimeter rocket pods, and a pair of bombs. This was to defend themselves in case they got too close to the enemy. This last situation became extremely common throughout the conflict, so much so that they were generally used to attack defensive positions. One day in February of 1968, an event would occur that the United States Army would hide for decades. 2 OBU-NOA were flying 600 meters above the Ashau Valley. The flight was led by Captain Ken Lee, one of the most experienced Mohawk pilots in the unit. Below him, there were more than 6,000 North Vietnamese soldiers with anti-aircraft batteries, waiting to fire at any plane that wasn't Soviet. Because of this, they maintained altitude in order to track enemy movements with sweep radars and infrared cameras. In an instant, Lee felt his plane take hits to the tail and immediately turned to the right. When his partner, 800 meters away, shouted at him, Lee leveled the wings and the MiG passed him at 500 kilometers per hour. Apparently, it was a MiG-17. He then returned to attack the Mohawks. The MiG erred by slowing down to approach the Mohawks more closely, thinking that they couldn't attack him because they didn't have guided weapons. When he had him in front of him, Lee, as a reflex, fired all his weapons at the MiG. In a second, 36 rockets and hundreds of 50 caliber shots rained down on the MiG. Lee managed to see the tracers pierce the fuselage. During the dogfight, they entered a bank of clouds. Then, as he came out, he saw the burning MiG falling as it circled around a mountain. He lost sight of it and missed the crash. Flying too low, it couldn't regain altitude. This was the first air-to-air kill achieved by the United States Army since World War II, and so far it has been the last. When the MiG was shot down, the Army quickly urged Lee to keep it a secret and apart from the operators. On the runway and among the pilots, no one knew it had been done. This shootdown was kept secret as it was the perfect excuse for the Air Force to take all the OB-1 and transfer them for the exclusive use of the Air Force. If it was just an observation plane, then why was it being used for air-to-air combat? Would the Air Force tell the Department of Defense? Because of this, those who knew the story of the shootdown were forced by their generals to keep everything quiet. It wasn't until 2007 that the Army revealed the shootdown to the world. This made Lee recognized as one of the most important pilots of the 20th century. In Vietnam, the Vietnamese gave the Mohawk the nickname the Whispering Death, thanks to the fact that it flew so low that it was hard to spot on radar, and its attacks were extremely unexpected. It served throughout the rest of the conflict with 67 lost in action. They were used until the Gulf War, until they were retired from service. It was a very long-lived aircraft, and because of its role went largely unnoticed, but it was responsible for the most improbable shootdown of the last half of the 20th century, and will always be remembered for that. If you enjoyed the video, you might be interested in learning about the existence and disappearance of twin-tail planes. Thanks for watching, and goodbye.